Okay, yeah, just get my dog to the side. He's coming inside, outside.
How many dogs do you have?
Now I have one dog, but he's a bit annoying. We go, okay, here he is. He's fine. He's fine.
I love dogs.
Here he is. He's very hairy. He needs a haircut.
Oh, it's a Shih Tzu.
Well, it's actually a
Is it
Yorkie,
a
a very hairy Yorkie.
Yorkie? Oh, yeah, yeah, Yorkshire Terrier. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's great. Okay, so we'll start in three, two, one. Okay,
Okay.
three, two, and one. Hey guys, this is Arpan Ghosh from Red Army Kolkata, and we're trying to understand how actually. We already have so many people, so many players coming out of our academy, Manchester United Academy, and we know that Carrington is one of the most mm, advanced academy systems in the world. But there are certain things about these footballers that we need to understand. And today, for that reason, we have Simon Edwards with us. Simon is one of the correspondents of World Football Index, and he works with the grassroots project in Colombia. He oversees, he understands, he tries to understand, and he will try to tell us what it is all about. So, hi Simon, how are you doing, man?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Very well. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, it is one of the, see, I always wanted to understand how this works, and I think the viewers who are going to watch this, who are watching this, and I think it will be one of the things that we do not actually see what happens behind the scene. But we'll first start with the elephant. How are you doing in this situation?
Yeah,
How are you
no,
dealing with this?
yeah, Colombia took quite a strong approach. However, it's been a delayed, so there's been strong restrictions since March. So in terms of a big spike, a big peak, Colombia hasn't had that as in Europe, but the situation hasn't really improved over 3 or 4 months. So on one hand, it's positive, but obviously, Colombia is a country where a lot of people work and live day to day. So having big restrictions on the economy is difficult. So hopefully, we're at the very peak now and we're moving towards a more positive situation. But yeah, it's been a long time locked up here in Colombia.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. And how are you? How are you actually going on with your work? Are you being able to work, or are you just?
Yeah, so my work has changed. As well as working in football, I also arrange events. So obviously, all of the events side of things are stopped. I've started a new project working for quite a big agency as well down here. So we're doing a lot of putting things in place, some player movements, but also things like establishing alliances with different clubs and kind of getting things in place for when we're able to move around the country, that we can then do that and meet with all these clubs. So it's been quite an exciting time, but also we have a lot of projects that have been slowed as a result of this. There are still players moving and there are still opportunities, but obviously things aren't moving as they usually would, and it's a bit of a delay. Some players who began this pandemic as 18-year-olds are going to finish it as 19-year-olds, and you know how quickly things move at that age in terms of player development.
Exactly. Now, since you mentioned player development, I want to understand how Colombia actually approaches player development, because we in India, I don't think this development part is still looked upon as a very important thing. But I think in football, this development phase is one of the most important things. So I want to understand the approach of the Football Federation in Colombia.
Right, so I think Colombia has many things, many great ingredients. I think the raw materials that Colombia have are incredible. So one thing that many people won't know about Colombia is each region is very distinct. So the Caribbean coast is warmer than inland. So for example, the type of player that Colombia produce, the different regions have a very different culture, a very different racial mix, a very different type of player. So the Caribbean coast is where you'll find your Luis Muriel's, your skillful, tricky forwards. The interior of the country, people are generally smaller. So you have your James Rodriguez, your Juan Fernando Quinteros. The Pacific, particularly Cauca, produced a lot of the 6'5" defenders, your Jerry Minas, your Davinson Sanchez's. So Colombia is, if you, for example, if you looked at Europe, you could say, well, the technical smaller players often come from Spain because physically they're developed in that way, whereas maybe Iceland has a lot of big defenders. Colombia is really 5 or 6 countries within one. So moving around the country, you can find a different type of player with a different physical development, with a different cultural background in different regions. So in terms of the raw ingredients, Colombia has a huge advantage. Now, I would say in terms of coaching and in terms of tactics and identity, Colombia falls behind Argentina, Uruguay. Uruguay is a tiny country with one city. Colombia is a big country with many cities, with many clubs. So the raw ingredients in Colombia, I think, are far superior to somewhere like Uruguay. But Uruguay has that history, that culture, that identity that helps get the best out of their talent. So I think Colombia has a lot of potential. I think Colombia should be on par with Argentina, should be competing maybe with Brazil. Brazil, I think, also suffers in terms of tactics and development, in terms of identity. The raw materials are also incredible. So I think Colombia has great talent. Also, in terms of the systems, Colombia, for example, has an under-13s tournament, which is televised, which gets, I think, 100,000 fans over a week watching the games. Hugely popular. James, Falcao, all these players began at that tournament. So there's a real focus and importance placed on youth football. And then there's only 2 professional divisions, top flight and second flight. So everything is focused on up until the under 18. And a lot of the youth teams in Colombia are exceptionally good, and they're not associated with a professional team. So whereas in Brazil, every 16-year-old has a big contract with Flamengo as a 50 million release clause, in Colombia, many of the U17 national team players are still playing for amateur youth clubs. Very, very good youth clubs, but with no professional affiliation. So many Colombian players move from these youth clubs straight to Europe, which is very, very cheap. So there's a real big opportunity if you can scout Colombia properly to get the best talents at a very good price if you go early.
Okay, that is a really interesting study, because in India, the structure is, because we ISL, we have 3 tiers. We have 3 professional tiers of national level leagues. I League, ISL is the topmost, I League, and the I League second division. Now, these are the most prominent ones. Now, you mentioned that the players are different from other South American countries like Brazil or Argentina. The growth and the kind of development that they get are kind of different. Now, if I want you to help me walk through, like if there are some things that can be improved, because see, I want to understand the kind of approach that because Colombia has produced great players, and to know that they came from really non-professional leagues is a big, because I had no clue because that this thing can happen. So do you think it is kind of a gap in the system, or do you think that helps the nurture?
Yeah, so the thing is, a lot of these academies have incredible recruitment. The players live on site. The players train every day. They're schooling. So a lot of these academies exist to produce the players to sell abroad, but they're never connected to a professional club. So I don't think it's necessarily a big problem, but it's something that foreign clubs have to learn about. Because if you're looking for a player in England, you would never consider a club that isn't a professional club, that isn't a top tier club. So I think it requires a bit of education. I think there's a big opportunity for the international clubs to understand the system and understand you can get Santiago Arias, who's at Atletico Madrid. He moved straight from a non-professional club to Europe. Roger Martinez, who plays for Club America, Colombian national team. There are many examples of players who, again, are U17 internationals, but aren't playing for professional clubs. So I don't necessarily think the development is impacted by that. I'd say in terms of what Colombia needs to work on, I think the quality of coaching and identity needs to improve. I think Colombia, for example, has a big obsession with the number 10, which has produced many great players, but I think that in terms of tactics has had an impact. And I think in some ways, an obsession with the number 10 has created many good defensive midfielders. So if you ask me where the best Colombian players are now, many are defensive midfielders because they've had to do the work to cover for the luxury number 10s who walk about and get all the credit. So it's quite interesting how that can impact on things. So I would say particular Colombian players, playing in reduced space. There's a lot of street football, a lot of informal games, so they're very, very technical with working their way out of trouble. Very skillful, very good individuals. And also Colombian football, going back to Valderrama, has always been very collective. Lots of short passes, pass and move, which again is very different to Brazil, where it's more get it to the wings and open up the game. So I think the Colombian culture combined with the street football identity creates great raw materials. But I think turning those players into Europe-ready professionals who have a good awareness, can open the pitch, can get up and down is where the work needs to be done. That's why I would recommend getting Colombian players at a young age, because they have all of the raw natural ability and the street smarts and all of that instinctive stuff. And then you just need to teach them the basics, and then you've got a great player on your hands.
Exactly. But Simon, the thing is that we do not see a lot of Colombian players in the Premier League.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think? But in La Liga or in others, there are so many Colombian players.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Falcao had a couple of stints with both Chelsea and Man United, but I don't think he was very successful. I don't think he would say that he was very successful with that. So do you think that anything that can be done to understand this?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, the biggest issue is the work permit. It's almost impossible for a Colombian to get a work permit to go to England. So that's why, for example, Watford signed Cucho Hernandez, a very, very good striker, been playing in La Liga on loan for 3 years. He still can't get a work permit to go to England, and he scored 2 goals in his Colombian debut. He's a very, very good striker. Reminds me a bit of Kun Agüero at Man City, but he still can't get a work permit. So that's the most important reason. You have to play 75% of the games for the Colombian national team in order to get a work permit. So that means there's maybe 20 players who are from Colombia who could play in England. So obviously there's Jefferson Lerma, there's Jerry Mina. I think Falcao suffered because he worked very hard to try to get fit for the 2014 World Cup. He had a bad injury and was training every day to try to get recovered for that World Cup. Wasn't able to do it. And since then, I think his physicality, his pace is all gone. So it was an unfortunate situation. Obviously, Cuadrado as well at Chelsea. Again, I always had doubts about that move, but he's shown at Juventus that he's a very talented player. So I think the biggest issue with England is the work permit. I can't take anyone from Colombia straight into England. There's very, very few players who could do that. So I think that really is by far the biggest issue, because they spend 3 or 4 years in Spain or Italy and then they're eligible for England, but at that point they're on the radar of some of the bigger clubs in Spain and Italy. They're comfortable in that league, comfortable in that setup. So I don't expect you'll see a great increase in Colombian players to England, but I think you'll continue to see them moving to Spain, Italy, Portugal, and Belgium is also a very interesting location for a lot of the best young Colombians at the moment.
Hey, that is hugely interesting, because we never see this side of the game. We often tend to think that if a player is good enough, he will probably play for one of the clubs anywhere. So I really had no idea that this work permit thing can actually hamper the deal so aggressively. So do you think, because you mentioned Cucho Hernandez, I was watching some stats. I think he has this dribble leading to shoot. I think he leads the chart. He leads that stat card in the continent at least. So in La Liga, I think he leads that chart. So what do you think that Cucho Hernandez, can he actually survive and play really well? Can he affect the Premier League? Because see, the thing I am trying to understand is whether we can, since the transfer window is starting, I want to understand how many players who are out there who are not yet into the limelight but can play a very effective role.
Yeah, I think Cucho has been playing regularly in Colombia since he was 15, 16 years old. I think he's played well over 100, he's played a lot of games in his career. And his goal stats have been incredible. He got promoted with Pereira, which is a second division side. And yeah, he's very interesting. Has played as a support striker, and then moved to Spain and for Huesca played as a number 9, now playing from the left. Very, very sharp around the box. Very, very good player. He's going to be playing again in La Liga this season. I would have liked to have seen him move to Watford at this point in the Championship. I think he would have scored a lot of goals, and I think he would have established himself. But in terms of talent, I mean, for Manchester United, I think there's two players who would get in the Man United first team and probably improve them. I would go Duvan Zapata, the striker at Atalanta, incredible target man. I always was a big, big fan of Zapata, even before he started scoring goals, because that's the thing. For much of his career, he did great hold-up play, was linking the play, a bit like a more athletic Emil Heskey, right? And then suddenly started adding goals to his game. And he hasn't stopped, and him and Muriel have been the top goal-scoring pairing in the history of the Serie A. Incredible numbers. So I think Duvan as the focal point for Manchester United will be ideal. He's played in a collective team. You can see that Solskjaer wants to play with dynamism and pace. That's something Atlanta do. But he'll give a focal point. And then you've got a lot of supplementary strikers at United. Martial, Greenwood, Rashford can all play around him. I think that would be really interesting. And I also think, for me, the best defensive midfielder, one of the best defensive midfielders in the world is Wilmar Barrios, who actually plays in Zenit St. Petersburg at the moment. But he's Colombia's best player. He's better than James. He's better than, I would say, better than Duvan as well. He played at the Copa America, had the best pass completion rate and had the best ball winning numbers. He's 26 now, playing in St. Petersburg, formerly of Boca Juniors. But for me, he's incredible. Similar to N'Golo Kante kind of player, but very, very elegant on the ball, very good at passing. I think for me, it's crazy that he isn't top of everyone's list, because I think those two players would immediately improve Man United. You have Wilmer sitting in front of the defence to enable Pogba and Bruno to break forward, and then you have a focal point out front in Duvan Zapata. So, and neither will be too expensive. I think Duvan might be a little bit, but his age maybe drops the price a little bit as well. Sorry, go ahead.
That is a very I would say pragmatic way of explaining the entire thing, because we all are looking at the players who are already in the transfer market. Thomas Partey is there for the defensive midfielder, and he would cost something around 50 million. I think Atletico made it very clear that they would not let Partey go anything under 50 million. And then Man United are looking for. So I think these players are not really look at. Maybe they are in the radar because we don't get to know a lot about them. But I think, yes, these might be very good signings, because the things that you mentioned, we are looking for one focal point where we can target one target man, because Odion Ighalo is leaving in the summer. His spell would end. So, yeah, we are looking at one target man and then one holding midfielder, because Matic is 31. He does not have the legs, and we do need a quality midfielder. So anything. So let's talk about James Rodriguez. So James, I don't think he's very settled at Real Madrid right now, because his 2-year loan spell did not conclude with. So since United are looking for Grealish or a number 10 in that role to improve the squad depth, do you think James adds to that, or do you think it would be more difficult for him, because you have had a considerable research on him?
Yeah, sure. Look, James is a very, very talented player. Like, he was the best player at a World Cup, and he was the top goal scorer at a World Cup. So I think at his very best, he deserves some respect, because he's been there and done it in a tournament. Also, you look at his career up until that point, and he'd always excelled at every level. Real Madrid is Real Madrid. His numbers initially at Real Madrid were excellent, but I think now he has to move on. And I think to get the best out of James Rodriguez, he has to be the main man, and he ideally has to be given a bit of a free role. So I think he has the quality to make a good impact at Manchester United. But if the idea is a 4-3-3, I don't see where he fits. That's my concern. Because you have Bruno and you have Pogba. I don't think either of them are moving, and you can put Pogba a bit deeper, but really you want him a bit of freedom. James is nowhere near as effective playing as a winger. He doesn't have the express pace. So I would much rather see James go to an Everton type of club, come in for Sigurdsson and have the freedom to influence the game. I think he's a Manchester United level player on his game, on his day, but I just don't see where he fits. And if you limit James, then you take so much out of his game. There are other players who you can say, okay, well, you go in there and you facilitate Pogba, you set up Bruno, you give him the ball, you make his job easier. James isn't one of those players. James needs to be the decisive player, the guy making the through balls, the guy working the opportunities. So I would like it. In many ways, I'd like the idea, but I don't see it being the best for James, and I think it could be potentially problematic for Man United as well to try and squeeze him in when he doesn't fit naturally in the system.
So, is there any? We spoke about Pucho, but since you want to see him play for Watford, so is there anybody in the Colombian side right now, or who might in that role, that number 10 role, who might be able to, enterprise something, who might change the game? Because we know that Bruno, we are linked with Jadon Sancho and Bruno. Both of them look for that end ball. But somebody like Mata, somebody who is technically more gifted, somebody who is technically more adept, so who can, maybe not always try the direct ball, maybe try to disguise it with a couple of very smart plays, run inside the pockets, something like that. Do you see anyone in your eyes who can facilitate that?
Yeah, so we'll be looking at players predominantly who are already in Europe in terms of the visa and the work permit. I would say number 10 of that level. Quintero's going cheap, and he's a wonderfully talented player, but he doesn't really have the looks. I don't see him as a Premier League player for a team like Man United. But for me, there's two. One would be Luis Diaz, who's at Porto, who's I think was Tottenham have been very interested in signing him. I think Porto said he was like 70 million rated. I don't imagine that's the case, but he's definitely had a very impactful first year in Portugal. I think he was one of the highest. I think he was the highest in terms of combined goals and assists in Portugal. Very, very quick left winger. Runs, can pick up the ball in his own area and run the length of the field. Shoots really well with power from range, and would fit into that kind of similar to Martial, similar to Rashford. So as a potential alternative, very, very quick, very skillful. He's actually got an interesting background. He comes from an indigenous community, which again is very rare to have. There are a few Colombians from that part of the country, and he was actually spotted playing for the Colombian indigenous national team by Carlos Valderrama. So it's quite interesting, and he's quite slight, but he's very, very quick, very skillful, very good in one-on-ones, and he can dig out a shot from the edge of the area, but also has a lot of creativity, can play as a number 10. So I think in terms of a player who would fit the Man United style, he's a good option. The other one that comes to mind would be Luis Sinisterra, who's been playing in Holland with Feyenoord. Again, can play as a winger or as an out-and-out striker, mostly as a winger. But again, very quick, very skillful, very good in 1v1s. Colombia have a lot of good number 10s, but I don't see them as natural fits in the Premier League. I think there's limited options for that kind of player. So I think what Colombia can offer is Duvan as a target man, Barrios as a holding midfielder, and then there's plenty of good options out wide. If you want someone younger, I think the best young player still in Colombia is Jamilton Campas, who was originally an attacking left back / winger, but has been playing as a number 8. Very, very quick, very skillful, but also very intelligent, works very hard in midfield, plays as like a box-to-box number 8. So he could maybe give you some of that solidity in a 4-3-3, but also scores goals, can skip past players, and is really good at building the play. A very intelligent, mixed midfielder. I'll be very interested to see where he ends up. There's been a lot of offers from Major League Soccer, but everyone involved seems to feel that he's much better right now to go to Europe, to a big club. And it'll be interesting to see. He actually grew up playing football on the beach, and you can see it in the way he plays. He loves a scoop, he loves a flick, he loves lots of sharp touches in midfield, but also is a very intelligent player. So Jamilton Campas, I think, is one to watch. But Luis Diaz and Sinisterra is potential right now.
Absolutely. That is this is the reason I wanted to talk to you, because know the names of the ones with whom we're linked with. but there are so many other potential about whom we know very limited because they do not get covered as much. They do not get the limelight as much. So I think it is very important to look at the alternative side of the game so that we can understand which player can suit the Man United rather than which player would fit the bills for the promotional, all these antiques. So yeah, now let's get back to the grassroots thing. Um, I think you have also noticed the growth of Mason Greenwood. Now, how would you, what is your take on that? Because you are experienced in this, I think. So yeah, you'd be able to make me understand, help me.
Sorry, you cut out for a second. Just tell me the question again.
Yeah, so I wanted to understand uh, how would you do the growth of Mason Greenwood? Because he's very exciting. He's exciting. He's young. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
no,
can you help me understand how does it happen actually?
yeah, sure. I think with Mason Greenwood, I think he's obviously talented, but the thing that sets him apart from me is his awareness, his ability to get the shot off quickly, his elegance, his balance. He actually reminds me of a Colombian player I like quite a lot, Juan Manuel Cuesta, who's been nicknamed Etu. Has a similar quality. He plays in Medellin, just turned 18, so he's still very young, but I think he has similar balance and poise, cutting in from wide areas. But for me, for Greenwood, the most interesting aspect is his ability to get his shots off. The fact that his shots almost always land on target, almost always hit with power. I think with young players, you can sometimes lack that confidence. You can clearly see that they have the natural ability, they have the physical attributes, but it's the end product. And that, for me, is why Mason Greenwood has stood out and has been able to break through into the first team at Manchester United, where many other players haven't. So I think confidence is so key in a player. Tactical awareness, understanding how you can use the movement of players around you to create the opening, to create the chances. So I think it shows the X factor is so important. It shows you can be very skillful, you can be very technical, you can be very quick, but knowing how to make the right decisions, having the confidence to take the right risks, backing yourself can make the difference between being a useful squad player who is there for a couple of months and then goes away. And I think Mason Greenwood has all of that. So I think it shows the fine margins between being a good player and being a really excellent player for the first team.
Okay, that is a very interesting analysis. Now, how how often do you think a player like people are dubbing Mason Greenwood as a generational talent? How often do you think players like these come from the academy and do not get noticed, and some of them get the recognition?
Yeah, I think again, I mean, look, luck is a part of it. Like it comes down to there's many factors, and being in the right place at the right time is obviously a big part of it. I'm sure we can look. I mean, Paul Pogba was at Man United and left and came back, right? And under different circumstances, he doesn't leave. And obviously that's a success story, but there are many other stories of a player leaving and it not working out. For example, my local club in Vigaro has produced James Rodriguez, Mateus Uribe, Juan Fernando Quintero, John Cordoba. You take your pick. They all came through the same academy. But the player they said was the most talented, you've never heard of, Mateo Cardona. He's the younger brother of Edwin Cardona. Incredible. Scores corners, scores free kicks, was linked with PSG, was linked with West Brom, was linked with everyone, Monaco. And he's currently playing on the bench for a second division team in Colombia. And the ability was always there. The problem is focus, the problem is arrogance, the problem is being told he was a star before he was a first team player. He had his logo ready, he had his brand on point, he had his agent, but he wasn't doing it on the pitch. And he wasn't collective enough. He had these great moments, he'd score from 40 yards, but then not make a 5-yard pass for the next 45 minutes. So I think there's so many factors. Also, when you factor in the possibility of players moving to another country, again, that development, learning the language, getting used to the environment, to the system, to the weather, there are so many ways this can go wrong. So I think clubs are learning. I think that's improved a lot. You look back, for example, a Colombian player, Juan Pablo Angel, when he first moved to Aston Villa in the 90s, he explained that he didn't speak the language, so he couldn't call up to make a doctor's appointment. He couldn't get his TV connected. He couldn't get his internet turned on because, he's a millionaire living in Birmingham, but he doesn't speak the language. He doesn't know anyone. He can't get his kids into school. And obviously that came with time, but clubs are learning now this liaison role, the role in enabling the player to feel comfortable at home, having people they can speak to, having people who can help them get their life in order. All these things, these little things, which you spend 50 million on a player, and paying someone to give them an English class can be the difference between success and failure. So I think clubs are learning to do that better, and obviously when it's a local talent is different. But with such fine margins between success and failure, everything clubs can do to make a young player's life easier or help them mature and develop is I think really, really important.
Okay, I think most of the analysis that you have just provided came from a really informed research that I read about you. I was reading a couple of things that you have written, and I was reading about you on the website, and I was pretty much intrigued by the kind of research you do. And yeah, thank you for being with us. It was great having you, and we look forward to meet maybe on subject. But this was really enlightening. Thank you so much for being with us.
No, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. We've actually, I've been talking to a couple of clubs in India about sending a couple of Colombian players over there. So maybe I'll meet you in India at some point. It's interesting. Before we finish, the Indian clubs.
Okay, that's.
The Indian clubs have a very clear idea what they want from their foreign players. They want fast players and they want tall defenders. They want quick wingers, pacey strikers, and tall defenders. So it's very interesting. And they have, if the player's 45 years old and can't run, but is 6'5", they're interested. So it gives an interesting opportunity for some Colombian players. So I was quite surprised. There's zero interest in resale value. There's no interest in getting a player at 21 and then selling them in a couple of years' time. They want a 35-year-old who's played 500 games. So, I mean, I've got plenty of that. We'll see what we can do.
Yeah, when you come back, when you come to India, make it a point to at least let me know, at least, because I will be there. I will be there to meet you. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much. Have a great time.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.